Thank you, Mr. President, for giving me the opportunity to share my voice on a bill that has been very much anticipated in this upper house. And I did make note that members opposite spoke of this being a campaign promise. And there has never been a time that this is denied, or we, the St. Lucia Labour Party members or parliamentarians, have had to deny that this was a campaign promise. No one is hiding from the fact that there has been pressure from the ground, from the people of St. Lucia, to be different. Nobody is hiding from the fact that there has been a call for change. And so our political leader at the time, our political leader, now Prime Minister, Honorable Philip J. Pierre, spoke of a special prosecutor whose role was to investigate and prosecute corrupt practices of public officials and public officers. So it is true, because the people want an end to corruption. But Mr. President, we should all want an end to corruption. And that is why the Prime Minister is delivering on his promise. Now, members opposite have been making certain allegations and saying that it is out in the public sphere. But I have never heard one member of cabinet or one member of parliament from the St. Lucia Labour Party government admit to corruption or corrupt practices. But I cannot say the same for the United Workers' Party, Mr. President, because it was their own former cabinet member who spoke of if he had to get involved in crime, if he had to do it, he would do it by himself. And did they forget the words of a former Attorney General who said that politics was not for good boys? Politics don't have room for good boys. If you are a good boy, you're not supposed to be in politics. We cannot say the same for members on the St. Lucia Labour Party side. And if a special prosecutor or even an attorney general on this side of the house would have any such words to utter, I bet you Honorable Philip J. Pierre would send him or her packing. But that just goes to show the level and the mindset of members opposite. And Mr. President, by the senator's own admission, she did speak of persons who have said that there are bad apples in her own party. She just admitted to that. They just admitted. You can never hear a member from this side said. Say anything.
Senator.
Mr. President, I stand on a point of order. I think 36, the senator is misleading the House. This is not what I said.
What did you say?
I was not referring to any specific bunch. Okay? This is the perception that many have of politicians in general. I was not referring to my specific bunch. So please be guided by what you say and repeat what I said and not what I didn't say.
Don't explain what she said. You are Senator, you may continue.
Yes, Mr. President, thank you, because the records have it that is exactly what you did say. But Mr. President, it is that same attitude that is discouraging for young persons or for people to even have an ounce or a glimmer of faith in persons who are involved in the highest decision-making body of this country. As the youngest member of parliament in the upper house, I believe it is my right to speak from the perspective of a young person. When you would have gone on the ground, Mr. President, leading up to the election, you know what the young people will tell you? You might be different, but all of them is the same. That is the attitude. That is the mindset, and that is the mentality of the people that we are trying to do better for, the young people. So if there is some legislation coming before the House to be able to say we are putting an end to this, I expect, Mr. President, that unanimously, with absolutely no shadow of a doubt, we would get the support from every single member of this upper house. But if there's backlash or if there's disagreement, why should you disagree with something that is going to change the lives of people in this country? Mr. President, when I said I was going to get involved in political activities, people said, "You think you can change the world, my girl?" Because you come in with an attitude, you come in with a mentality to want to do something different, Mr. President. And the people out there have absolutely no faith. Mr. President, I can tell you, I have faith. And I am proud to be part of this Philip J. Pierre administration that is delivering on a promise that says no to the mismanagement of funds and using political office for undue advantage and corruption. And Mr. President, why is this necessary? We need to restore hope and confidence in our population. We need to restore hope and confidence to the people that we are speaking to, the people who are at home listening. Mr. President, we are not all the same. And I see them trying to look for pity from public servants, the same 43%ers, the same ones they have absolutely no confidence or faith in to do their work, that they have to spend $18 million to consultants. They have to spend $15 million, correct me if I'm wrong, about that to prepare our own budgets. But don't come here and play this hypocrisy, Mr. President, that you care and you want to look for sympathy from the public. The St. Lucian public is fed up, and that is why we had to make this campaign promise. We had to tell them that we will do something about it, and that is what we are doing here. Mr. President, you think this vaccine story will disappear overnight? It will not disappear overnight, because I want to know, when are we going to get the rest of our $7.2 million, Mr. President? The people of St. Lucia want to know. You mean to tell me the former Prime Minister can go to the media and say, Mr. President?
Mr. President, I'd like to stand on a point of order, 37. That whatever the senator is speaking to at the moment is irrelevant to the bill. Talking about vaccine and when we are going to get our money back, this is irrelevant. The senator needs to confine her submission to the bill.
Excuse me, sir.
Thank you.
Senator, I beg to disagree on this point. The assertions made by Senator Jawahir was in relation to spending by the former government, which some answers have not been forthcoming, and we all know that. And accordingly, there is a very strong correlation between the two. So I disagree. You may continue.
Thank you, Mr. President. I realize the senator is very excited to hear my presentation, but I will expound so you can get an understanding of what I am talking about. $7.2 million, as you rightly stated, Mr. President, we need answers. And I am talking about corruption. I am talking about using public office for undue advantage. I am talking about mismanagement and absolutely no transparency, because the former Minister of Finance, who was the Prime Minister, who is the leader of the opposition, came out and said he did not know of the company, but he knew of the person. How can you give these hard-earned taxpayers' dollars to someone to acquire vaccines who have absolutely no medical history, who has never purchased any medicinal drugs before, to be able to purchase vaccines for our people? And then 5 weeks later, form another company called Good Vibrations, it is in the record, to be able to acquire vaccines, an entertainment company? And you want to talk about corruption or mismanagement? Mr. President, we have a lot of questions. And we came here, Madi Puete after Madi Puete, $500 million average, $500 million to borrow for COVID support. And you're telling me when the St. Lucia Labour Party administration came in, a year later, we still had to come and get support for our health sector. The $18 million to health consultants, where did that money go, Mr. President? You think the people of St. Lucia do not deserve answers? We're giving beach access to our children to build restaurants with absolutely no approval. And you're telling me that is not use of your office for advantage, Mr. President? You want me to be specific? I can be specific. $2,000 a night for hotel stays. We need answers. £2,000, almost 10,000 EC dollars. You know, like it's nothing, Mr. President, because the people of St. Lucia are not working hard enough. And you think we could not have done with this money in this time and age that we are living in? When you, of course, on the other side, did admit in your press conference yesterday, I heard it, I was paying attention, that inflation is no fault of ours. And you think if we had access to that money, we would not have been able to do better for the people of St. Lucia? The 80-20 rule in shock development, we will hear more about it. Chairpersons benefiting from contracts, blatant conflict of interest. 70 million to be paid to a construction company in 1 year, 5 months before an election. Let me tell you, we have a lot of questions, and I am very excited for the special prosecutor, Mr. President. And we talked about the comfort letter a bit earlier. Serious. And you know what? We need to investigate it. By the senator's own admission, if it's there, let us talk about it. Because the former member of parliament for Castries Southeast said that the letter was forged. And I think, Mr. President, this is very serious. So for me, and for everybody on this side, if there's one thing that the special prosecutor should investigate first, it should be the
Senator, we both can be standing at the same time. You rise on the point of order.
Yeah, section 37, subsection 5 of the standing orders, where it says no senator shall impute improper motives to any member of the chamber. It's one thing for the senator to allege on some very specific cases where, in this context, we're discussing a bill to ensure that we stamp out corruption. But the issues that she's mentioned, one, I'm bringing it to you.
Please.
So, by mentioning that the vaccines, for one, there's no corruption there, right?
Senator, you talked about improper motives on a member.
Yeah. No, because it was a cabinet of which I was part of.
Which member are you talking about?
Members of the previous government.
You said improper motives of a member.
Yeah.
Which member?
The member here and the member myself were both in the cabinet.
Senator, Senator.
You're mentioning that.
Senator.
Yes.
I get to speak in silence.
Sure, go ahead.
You have the rules in your hands.
Yes.
Right, so you will allow me to speak.
Yeah, okay.
Right. You rose on a point of order.
Yeah.
And your point of order was casting improper motives.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
I asked you to point to me to whom were the improper motives directed?
So can I continue?
If you're going to point me to that.
Okay, so when the senator mentions that £2,000 was paid for a hotel, I think she's in government when she's going to make such a serious allegation. That could mean any one of us. And so what she has to do is, if she's not talking about us, then she must make it clear who in the former government is she talking about. And number two, provide the evidence, because she is specifically claiming and telling the public that she has.
Senator, I think you've lost your way.
That there's £2,000 paid for a hotel.
Senator.
Yes.
Senator, it cannot be improper because it is a fact. Continue, Mr.
It is what fact?
Thank you, Mr.
I never
President.
paid £2,000 for a hotel room.
Thanks, Mr. President. I can clarify, because it was said in the lower house by the leader of the opposition, to which he did not deny. He never stood on any point of order to say it was not true. But before the senator rose on his point of order, I was speaking of the Padua letter, Mr. President. That's what I was speaking of. Because the member at the time did admit that his signature was forged. And I am saying, if such a thing did happen, then it needs to be investigated. We all want to know because we have questions. We're not going to ask about it if we didn't think that it needs to be answered. But that is exactly what I'm talking about, Mr. President. No transparency, no accountability from the previous administration. And that is what we are trying to prevent. The passage of the Special Prosecutor Bill will leave no stone unturned. No public official, no public officer will ever have any excuse, like Senator Reynolds say, of ignorance of the law. And that includes myself, every single one of us. So, Mr. President, you see, I know they want to try to stand and say this and that is not said when people in the lower house have admitted, when they go publicly on the media and say this and that, and they try to fool the people of St. Lucia. But anyways, we will not continue in that direction, Mr. President. What I am saying is we have gotten to a point where things are very difficult for the people of St. Lucia. And it will be remiss of us to not bring up the sins that got us to where we are and why it is that the St. Lucia Labour Party administration is trying to change the course to bring St. Lucia back on the right track. If this money was spent in investment for our people, we would have been further along. We would have been able to give our parents more. Thankfully, the $500 bursary program is ongoing for grade 6 students now going into Form 1. I was a beneficiary of that. I can tell you, this impacts the most vulnerable, the less fortunate among us. But if corruption continues, Mr. President, we will have no money to be able to do those things. We will have absolutely no incentives to give the fishers and the farmers. We cannot help bus drivers. We cannot help persons who were impacted by COVID. We cannot help the tourism and hospitality sector. If we continue to do this, Mr. President, and allow it, our health system will come crumbling. St. Lucia would not have progressed, and that is not the St. Lucia that I know we all want to be a part of. Most of the persons who are sitting around this table, Mr. President, have children. Some still going to school. And you tell me that the consequences of your actions will not impact them? It will. The consequences of our actions here will. And if we do not pass this Special Prosecutor Bill, it says that we are sending a loud message that we do not care. Of course we know corruption happens. It's very rampant among us in this country, and people want to play a blind eye. But we are simply saying we can no longer allow this, Mr. President. If we need to give our children some glimmer of hope, if we need to give our young people some glimmer of hope, and stop stealing from them, because that is what it is. It is stealing their future, stealing their livelihood, stealing their opportunity at a chance to advance. And that is why, as legislators, we need to make a decision to be on the right side. It's not about yellow, it's not about green, blue, red. This is something that is affecting every single one of us. You know, when people look at you as a young woman and think you've never been involved in any sort of corruption, but think that it's a possibility, it is sad. Because you are not really being singled out. You are being blamed for the actions of previous persons, Mr. President. And for me, I see a clear distinction in why this is important. The bill is specific. The special prosecutor is needed to investigate and prosecute corruption and corrupt practices. That is different from the parliamentary commissioner. It is different from the Attorney General's office. It is very different from the Director of Public Prosecution and the Financial Intelligence Authority, who all have their specific mandates. And yes, I do acknowledge and heed the words of Independent Senator Lee that more can be done to strengthen. But of course, we understand that every single one of those departments have their mandates. And if we are going to implement a department that is going to deal with this once and for all, I am fully in support of it, Mr. President. When I came to the House of Assembly on Tuesday, right before I came upstairs, this lady, who happens to be a supporter, had some questions. She was saying, do we need to do this right now? People are hungry. And admittedly, these are questions that people are having. But when I had to explain to her that, can you imagine what we can uncover and recover from the office of the special prosecutor, it will be worth it, Mr. President. It will be worth it, because St. Lucians will finally know two things. One, where their money went to, and two, who stole it, if indeed somebody did steal it. And so, Mr. President, with these brief words, I want to give my unwavering support to this special prosecutor bill. Thank you.